Mark Burns, a vocal Trump supporter and pastor with a history of questionable claims, recently announced the creation of his very own Christian Military Academy. No, this is not a joke. It's not a parody, but it sure does sound like one. At the ReAwaken America event, known for conspiracy theories and fervent Christian nationalism, Burns declared his mission to save children from the evil public school system. It seems his main concern is to actually shield them from LGBTQ issues and woke teachings. Now we're left pondering, is Christian military the new alphabet or just another episode of Trump's reality show? This article is from Right Wing Watch, published October 16th, 2023. Over to Moth.
No problem. Moth will take it. Moth first wants to let everyone in the audience know, because I feel compelled to say that Pastor Mark Burns does not speak for Black people. I just feel compelled to say that. And I also find it quite ironic that a pastor who falsified his military and academic record during his failed congressional bid in 2016 is opening up a military school. Can you say irony?
I thought I could, but I can't now. I'm speechless.
Irony. Yeah.
Irony. Irony 1, 2, 3. But I'm gonna send it back to you, Pharaoh, because
right.
you're a military person. Last time I checked, I know that you play one on TV. You play one on the nonprofits. So I'm curious to know, what were your initial reactions when you were actually reading this story?
Well, really, I want to know what he's hiding, to be honest with you, because the falsifying of his military record, it's odd because it's not really that far of a stretch. So he said that he was in the National Guard for 6 years, but he was in the reserves for 6 years, but it turned out he was in the National Guard for only 4. I wouldn't have scoffed at his 4-year record in the National Guard. I think that that's honorable for anybody to step up and want to serve. And whether it's the Guard, the reserves, or active duty, you doing your part is notable. But why change it? Why lie to people about his service in the Guard and just switch to the reserves and then shorten or extend the time frame? I think there's something that we're not being told. And I couldn't really find anything on the reason for discharge, although all of the articles do highlight that he was discharged in 2008, just not mentioning. So, that is teetering on the edge of a very, I would say, cardinal sin, if you will, for the military. And that is when somebody pretends to be something they're not in the military. For a civilian to do that, we call that stolen valor. But for other military members to do it, it's almost a little bit worse. And so I kind of would like some clarification on that. But this is no small thing to consider, that he wants to build a Christian military academy. I have a lot of thoughts on that. I think I'm going to sum it up by just saying, how is this different from terrorism? Honestly, I mean, that's kind of a sweeping statement, right? But how is this any different from looking at other parts of the world where they have religious and military combined training centers? I mean, is this not what we are looking at? Is this not the rhetoric that this man is spewing? And especially in light of attempted coups in our own country that are related to this kind of far right-wing craziness, I think it's dangerous. It's just dangerous talk. Now, I did do some digging and try to find what the status was on this project, and it doesn't look like construction has started. I could be wrong, and I'd like to know if I am, but that's actually a win for us, or a win for the world, if you will, because he wants to open by 2024. He's got a lot of work to do. I think that this is probably more likely along the lines of the article that we discussed a few weeks ago on the nonprofits, where there was a pastor who asked for, I think it was $6 million to be donated for a real estate purchase because God wanted him to do it, and he only ended up.
It was actually,
or maybe,
it was only over 2 million. And then he said that because they didn't build it, they decided not to build it, he kept the money.
Jesus.
Yeah,
Christ.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And so, this man, is probably collecting a lot of donations from desperate people who think that he speaks for them. And I would say that this is nothing but a grift. And it's all related to this culture of lies, whether it's about being in the military or whether it's about getting an education, whatever you have to do, it seems these people are willing to do it. And so those are my initial thoughts on that. I appreciate you kicking it off and kicking it over to me and letting me, as the resident military man here, or military person, I should say. The Egyptians, by the way, were not very good when it came to archery. We had to contract out to around the Nile River Valley. Just a food for thought. But I'm still the king.
There.
Yeah. Matter of fact, also a fun fact before Kelley starts, and I love you to death, Ramesses, but did you know that you also had to hire people from Nubia to also be soldiers, because the soldiers in
Egypt, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the C group. The C group peoples, the Kerma culture, the Majay that are down in what's now known as like the Somalia region. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And Egypt Sudan was not. Yep. That's correct. That's correct. Down below the, what's called the Third Cataract, which is a rocky outcropping in the Nile. It's almost like I've done my research on this area. But I won't bore you with any more history. It is really thrilling though, to learn about the cultures there. Egypt was not always the hegemon in the area. They came later. So
indeed. Well, let's hedge on over to Kelley, the resident geologist.
All right. I appreciate. Yeah, thank you.
Be a math teacher.
Being a published geologist and scientist, I'm happy to chime in on this. But one of the things that stood out for me from this story was this quote here. It says, we're getting this world ready for the return of Donald J. Trump, Burns bellowed. Donald Trump is ready to come back, but we need to make sure that he's got warriors ready to stand with him. We don't care about those indictments. We don't care about those arrests. We can take those to the gates of hell. Now, the first thing about that is that why are they going to the gates of hell? That doesn't seem to make sense. But more seriously, is this idea of deifying a politician, right? They used words. I could have sworn that was taken straight from the Bible, right? I mean, it sounds like they're talking about the big J man himself, right? Wait, Donald J. Okay, all right. Checkmate atheists on that one. But I'm curious as to why this is happening. I mean, we can see the manipulation, Ramesses, you were talking about, that there's something fishy going on. There's some kind of ruse. Why would they be talking about a particular politician as being God? And so I found an opinion piece. Now, this is an opinion piece, but it was from BaptistNews.com titled "How Donald Trump Became God," written by author and former Baptist minister David Ramsey. And so here's what he had to say. So how did this unrepentant serial sinner become divine in the evangelical movement? The answer lies in two arguments: the desire of a Christian evangelicals to have proximity to power, I think that's key, and how historical events become imbued with theological meaning. While many Americans still believe the Christian right is a religious movement primarily concerned with values, leaders of the movement know it's really a political movement focused on money and power. This is a former Baptist minister talking here. So a political movement focused on money and power, the fusion of which supplies its foundation. And here, I thought this was particularly telling. Willie Sutton, when asked why he robbed banks, famously replied, "Because that's where the money is." Trump and his movement have money and power in spades. And so if we're wondering why the religious right is cozying up to people like Burns and like Trump, that's where the money is. That's what we're looking at here. Just let that hover up there for a second. That's where the money is. And it's just a practical transaction that we're seeing here.
That's
Moth,
interesting.
what do you got for that?
Well, that's interesting. And I'm just like you, I'm just basically giving my thoughts off the cuff here, hearing that from Dave Ramsey. Isn't that dude, money dude from Focus on the Family?
Yep.
Who in of itself had very problematic viewpoints, if I recall. especially especially when it came to bodily autonomy, the push for nuclear families instead of recognizing other families that may be headed even by LGBTQ people, and have said some pretty problematic things in the past. So for him to actually step outside of his own cognitive dissonance, because it would seem from some of the content that he has pushed in the past that he would be more so on the side of the Christo-fascist, nationalist, MAGA hat wearing people. But I believe that he kind of called it out for what it really truly is.
Yeah, he said the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, he did, which is pleasantly surprising. But I want to hear some more pleasant, surprising things from Jason Vorheesberg going on here. So what were your thoughts, Jason?
Well, I mean, Ramesses and Kelley gave the educated answers, and I was thinking the same things, I swear. The problem that I have with this guy is this. I just did a 12-hour deep dive on Mormonism. And
Why?
the same I want to bring up the language. Well, because it's interesting, because it's one of the few religions that we can literally watch happen in real time, and it's documented and we know it. Cults are my thing. So when you look at a cult, what you do, the cults that succeed and become religions, or the cults that succeed and pull in money and have leadership and have hierarchies, what they do is they pull from common themes. So by what Ramesses was bringing up about using that language that or I think it was Kelley, I forget. One of y'all, I think all y'all brought it up. The language that was used in the Bible that was applied to this fucking traitor is on purpose, because you start connecting those heuristics, those cultural things that you've learned to accept as valid and true. And if you have it driven into you and you're in a place, you're on the media, so that's automatically given somebody a idea of authority. I'm in the limelight, thus I should be listened to. On here, none of us should be listened to. All of our opinions should be taken to task. I'll say that right now. You should listen to it, and then you should try your best to prove me wrong. But what I am seeing is a cult pattern that is clear and prevalent and has been demonstrated time and time again when you have these fucking cults of personality with religious depth added to it. It's terrifying and it's powerful. So I think this is a man who is not only an abhorrent individual and my enemy, he should be feared. And the people who surround themselves with people like this and listen to people like this, they should be feared, and for good reason. Not feared to where we should run away, but taken seriously. So I'm gonna throw it back to you, MG.
Yeah, I kind of want to stay in that area for a moment, because you mentioned about the rhetoric coming out of people like Pastor Burns and those who repeat some of the same things that could be very problematic, inflammatory, hell, even dare I say treasonous. I don't know if I would be far off by saying that. But I did have a question that came to mind about that whole thing, especially with this military academy. So the idea of a military academy run by someone known for using violent rhetoric is concerning. And I agree with you, Jason, about this. This should be taken serious, and it is something that, is scary. So how should educational institutions balance freedom of speech and the promotion of values that prioritizes safety, yet also inclusivity? What are your thoughts, Pharaoh?
Ooh, hitting me with the tough ones, huh?
Yes, yes.
So, well, you are the king of kings.
Yeah.
So,
you are. You are. You're the sun god on earth, sir. So what can I say?
I better come up with a really good answer, or else I'll lose credibility with my minions. But
indeed.
Yeah. So how do we balance? Can you rephrase that again? Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, so it's always going to be a concern, and this is something that we have seen when we are hearing people using platforms to use incite inflammatory rather language,
Mm,
like Burns
yeah.
has. Yet there is a delicate balance into still protecting one's right to the freedom of speech. So,
Mm.
what is the best way that we actually look at being able to actually interject that valid balance and also condemn those who are using this violent, inflammatory language that can gin up certain actions that we have seen, like on January 6th?
Yeah, well, I think that there is not the same kind of enforcement of these values that we have as a society across groups, as a whole. So for example, I'll give one. We know that churches are preaching politics and political messages from their pulpits, and they're not actually supposed to do that, right? But
Yep.
there are others
Yep.
of us that don't do that, don't break those similar rules because we know that we're going to have to face the consequences. And I think those consequences, we as a culture, we as a society, for some reason, have not really standardized those consequences, nor have we drawn a line um, where we have a clear cut idea of what are words versus actions, right? I don't think that we necessarily need to wait for the action to take place. But we have to come just short of that, right? We have to be able to observe and say, okay, that's it. That was a line was crossed today. I don't know that we're very good at that, to be honest with you,
Mm,
as people,
mhm,
and
mhm,
I'm willing to admit that. The way that we govern and the way that we kind of hold ourselves accountable is very nuanced and unfortunately not always fair. But having these conversations and pointing out that there is dangerous rhetoric coming from these people. You know what I mean? And maybe even having to bring that conversation into the living room around the Thanksgiving table, because it's not happening with strangers out in public. We all have loved ones that we care about greatly that see things so different from us. And sometimes we just got to plant that seed and say, what you're thinking, what you think is harmless is actually incredibly harmful, and here's why.
Yep.
I
yeah,
think that's the best answer I have.
Yeah.
yeah,
Fully agree. Fully agree.
yeah. Jason, you want to
I
add a
appreciate
little
that.
bit on that if you don't mind?
Well, yeah. I mean, I just wanted to echo what the King of Kings was saying,
Yes, and the Lord of Lords,
and the
indeed.
Lord of Lords. Thank you. Thank you for
Mhm,
your input
mhm. No
and
problem.
allowing me to speak, sir. But yeah, it's at its core, the rhetoric is anti-science. It is anti what we know has been established by the National Institute of Health and CDC guidelines. And so, like you said, to me, the guy is a traitor to America. The guy, by falsifying his military records, he more or less spits in the face of veterans who are suffering from PTSD. Not to mention the people that he is representing and a mouthpiece for are the people who are fighting to remove healthcare from people, the people who are fucking over veterans, the people
Mm,
who are pushing anti-scientific propaganda. If you look at what the Texas GOP released in their whole mission statement a few years back, it's this, I think it's like 37, 40 pages of the most atrocious fucking bullshit that is, again, anti-science, anti-well-being, and to me, anti-American. So I
Mm,
do agree. The guy is a traitor. The guy, what he's saying is treasonous. He's trying to mix. I really appreciate what you brought up about the fact that he's able to show political affiliation while still collecting as a nonprofit and not paying fucking taxes. That is disgusting. We need to start
mhm.
taxing these fucking companies, these businesses, because that's what they've shown themselves to be. And I agree there needs to be harsh fucking punishments for these people. They are enemies of the American way of life. They are enemies of the majority, which we are becoming a minority majority nation. And at the point where we're at right now, especially in Texas, we are a minority majority state and we are underrepresented underrepresented because these motherfuckers are mouthpieces for other criminals. So that's how I feel about that. I'm gonna throw it back to you, MG, because if I'll just keep rambling about this shit.
Oh, you're good. You're good, Jellicoe. Don't worry about it. And when you are singing about midnight and being on the sound of the pavement, just remember the moon has not lost her memory. But Kelley, Scott, question for you, especially since you are the local teacher scientist. Mark Burns, as we already have completely shown, in my opinion, these are my opinions and not necessarily of the panel or the ACA, is an unqualified fuck.
Yeah.
So
I think that's an industry term. I think that's an educational term there.
I agree. But how important is it to actually have a person's background and qualifications when they are in a position of influence and leadership, particularly in education, to be vetted, shown, and actually, propped up in order for them to say that, yes, I am qualified to lead institutions like this, especially educational ones?
Right. Well, the short answer is very important. It's very important that if somebody's setting up a school, that they be qualified to do so. And, schools are a backbone of our country. We want to have a knowledgeable and well-informed electorate. We want to have opportunities for people to live that quote unquote American dream, and having a strong public education system is key to providing opportunities for climbing that ladder and for getting out of poverty and for just empowering yourself in so many ways. But we're talking about a private school here, and so the rules are different. Ramesses was saying earlier about how we need to have firmer guidelines, and we need to figure out how to know when somebody's crossing that line. Well, we do have a lot of that in place. It's just that it's not equally applied. It's not applied to, equally to everybody. If you tell somebody that you have a religious school, lots of doors are going to open for you. Lots of checks are going to come rolling in. And so the fact alone that it's a private school tells you that, okay, there's no requirements. It's set aside. It's not a concern. It's not a concern of the government. Right. And so that's going to come up there. Having said that, there are, of course, many very good private schools. But there are many bad private schools too. And so, and full disclosure here, I work for the state of Minnesota. I was a public school teacher in Minneapolis for 10 years, and I've been in the college system in Minnesota for the last 15 years. And so I'm very pro public education, and I think for good reason. However, I know that a lot of people like to have private school for a variety of reasons. And I think many of those reasons are legit. And so I think it's something that's not going to be going away, but we do owe it to ourselves. We have a responsibility to the children, and we also have a responsibility to the future of our nation. And if we want to, American students are struggling. And if we want to be a leader in the world in anything, we need to know how to do it. We need to know things, and we need to understand how things work. And we need to be able to look at a problem and pick it apart and understand the pieces and figure out, what we want to do. We need to be able to drive things in the direction that we want them to go. That's the real value of education, is that it empowers you to enact what you think is good and right. And so I wish that we had stronger, I don't want to necessarily say regulation, but at least stronger cooperation, at least maybe make partnerships with these private schools or something to introduce some sort of regulation. Now, many private schools do have regulation, but it's self-imposed. It's like, okay, we will adopt, this particular accreditation organization, we're going to adopt their standards and so on. And so again, I'm not trashing all private schools, but what I am saying is that when we have the power of a private school, along with the power of parents that want things to be the way that they want them, and which is not necessarily the best way. And as long as we have this imperfect regulation and oversight, we're going to run into problems. And so it's not necessarily a problem that has an easy solution, but I don't think, closing our eyes and hoping for the best is really the best way to go here.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I am very concerned about this whole thing with this person, Mr. Burns. Well, first off, I'm getting like a picture of Mr. Burns from The Simpsons.
Ahoy, hoy.
Like, excellent. Like looking, but one of the reasons that I also have a concern is that I don't know if you all got a chance to take a look, but they wanted to use the Abeka curriculum, which is actually, I believe, like a large Christian homeschool curriculum. That when I looked at the reviews for it, it was quite mixed, and most of the reviews comes from like momandhomeschool.com and things of that nature. But this is also a curriculum that uses textbooks that says that slavery was Black immigration. So, and also said that Nelson Mandela helped to move South Africa to a system of radical affirmative action. So I get concerned about curriculums that use books that teach revisionist history.
My skeptic sense is tingling on those.
Yeah. Needless to say that in 2017, Abeka's website actually boasts that they have reached more than 1 million Christian school students in that year. Even more concerning. So, to a pastor who faked his military records and his academic records using a curriculum to push fake revisionist history, I just have 2 words: goddamn. But another thing I can say to you all is another 2 words. If you want to hear more from the nonprofits, click here.